Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 201. Free hand granted. There are only the early signs of it at present. Zhao Jianhun stated coldly, this scheme will require a very serious amount of planning before it can be executed. After all, the Jun family is the strongest military power of the Tianxiang Empire, and even the emperor doesn't not take your family lightly. However, their plan seems abundantly clear. Haha. The smell of their mother's milk hasn't even dried out yet. And those 3 kids are actually thinking of targeting my family. Jun Wuyi laughed coldly. Moreover, the fact that the Donghua family still can't find a suitable match for their daughter has made their position unclear on this matter. Zhao Jianhun added, to be honest, I'm actually looking forward to this happening. If the 2 main forces of the Tianxiang Empire are divided, if your empire's backbones breaks, then it's a good thing for us. And I can just take my army and vandalize your entire force in one swoop. And then I can easily expand the Yutang map. How wonderful would it be if I could just unify this world in one single swoop? Why are you telling me this? What's in it for you? Jun Wuyi grunted. I cannot hide this in Jun Wuyi's presence. I'm only telling you this because you're Jun Wuyi's family, and he was my most respected opponent. Zhao Jianhun turned around and looked at Jun Wuyi's statue once again and then slowly spoke. I'm looking forward to the Jun family producing another man or woman of the White Commander's caliber. But either way, I cannot allow this once heroic family to vanish in the dark of a power struggle. This is the only thing I'm capable of doing for the idol of my heart. Zhao Jianhun stood up straight and strode forward to Jun Wuyi's statue once again, looked up at it, and continued to stare at it for a long time. And then he suddenly turned around. I'll take me leave. I won't be seeing you out. Jun Wuyi stated in a harsh tone, and then added, nor will I be thanking you. Zhao Jianhun stood motionlessly for a while before he smiled at Jun Wuyi, and asked in a coarse voice, you won't see me out? Suddenly his voice lowered as he asked, am I not important enough? Or perhaps I'm not worthy enough? Jun Wuyi was silent for a while, but then he smiled and said, you are. I understand. Zhao Jianhun took a deep breath. Once I leave, I'll immediately return to Yutang. Jun Wuyi, if we ever meet on the shopping mode battlefield again, don't hesitate. And don't think that I won't attack you mercilessly because of today. The sides of his face showed a sign of sadness. All these years, I've had to bear all this. And I'm really tired of it now. The undefeated general. But I'm really just a lucky B** starred. Once he finished this last sentence, he turned around and walked away. Without looking back, without speaking another word. His desolate silhouette continued to walk away, his black cloak raised in the wind, his head held high, and his figure slowly disappeared out of sight. The Tianxiang soldiers stationed on both sides of the walkway could only stare at their enemy nation's commander in awe. This man is too proud. Jun Wuyi whispered as he stared at Zhao Jianhun's disappearing figure. Back then, Big Brother had once said, his pride is his character's biggest weakness, and can be used to trick him into several traps, and he'll tread into them each time without repenting his action. Jun Moxie couldn't help muffling his laughter. Yes. But he should have died 100 times by now. Managing to stay alive till now isn't an easy thing to do in his case. Although this man is too proud. But his pride is also his greatest asset. He's well versed with every battle formation, every ambush tactic, and his knowledge of warfare transcends that of any other man. Why shouldn't he be proud of his abilities? If I were him, I'd be the same. Jun Wuyi smiled. and this great ability of his was always admired by your father. Even in the greatest moments of desperation, this man never gave up. In fact, he never even gave up hope even though he was defeated several times. Your father and I were once talking, and he told me that even he wouldn't have been able to do this. Zhao Jianhan is an exceptional man. He never gives up, no matter how harsh his circumstances are. Jun Moxie could only endorse this statement in his heart. Setting sail with the tailwinds is not regarded as talent. Surviving through adversities and fighting to survive and continuously fighting back is the sign of a true hero. At that time, when we were trying to study Zhao Jianhan, it was his own actions and words that had helped your father in deciding the strategy for dealing with Zhao Jianhan. Jun Wuyi's words were brimming with pride, and his strategies are still valid when it comes to dealing with Zhao Jianhan. What? Jun Moxie suddenly became interested in knowing more. Zhao Jianhan was one of the most prominent bachelors in Yutang at that time, and one of the most influential ministers of the empire wanted to give his daughter to Zhao Jianhan in marriage. But that woman was extremely fat and ugly. Jun Wuyi smiled. At that time, Zhao Jianhan had bluntly spoken out in front of the entire cabinet of minister. How such an ugly woman a worthy match for such a brilliant general? Jun Moxie burst into laughter. The first time when Big Brother heard of this, he said, Zhao Jianhan is proud, blind to political power, and superior to his fellow soldier in terms of all kinds of abilities. He holds himself in a very high light, and will never allow himself to be subjugated to another man. Since the Yutang Empire lacks this kind of talent, they will allow him to break the rules to allow him to flourish. But this a bad thing for him. Being proud and aloof is good for a learned man in most cases. But there can be exceptions when pride can also become a fatal flaw. Even in the future, whenever anyone is capable of grasping this weakness of his, that man will be able to put himself in a position of invincibility against Zhao Jianhan. Jun Wuyi's voice seemed full of recollection. Big Brother had once said, Zhao Jianhan is an ordinary general, but he has still risen to the spot of Yutang's most prominent general in less than 2 years. Big Brother had said, but even then, his weakness still remains the same as before. Getting a hold of his weakness isn't very difficult. But to use his weakness into getting the better of him isn't easy because his personality foreordains toughness of character. It will take more than just a series of fatal blows to erase his fighting spirits. But even then he would eventually come back. And that's exactly what happened. Big Brother used his weakness to defeat him 29 times. But unfortunately in the final battle. It's easy to change circumstances, but it's difficult to change one's nature. Jun Moxie sighed as a burst of sincere respect arose in his heart for the father he had never met. This one sentence alone had given infinite knowledge about the enemy general. This one sentence alone was enough to get a hold of the enemy general's weakness, but moreover had laid out the necessary plan to defeat the man. It is no wonder that Jun Wuyi is regarded as the god his generation's military minds. After understanding Zhao Jianhan's weakness, Jun Moxie instantly understood the reason behind the man's suffering. He's a proud man, and a real warrior. If such a man has to bear the shame of defeat, then he perhaps wouldn't take it to his heart, and will probably be able to withstand it because he knows that he can find another opportunity to wash that shame away. But now he has to bear the shame of something that doesn't even belong to him. A shady victory. For such a proud man, this victory is even more painful than death. The lucky general. This title, such shame is something that a man like Zhao Jianhan is simply incapable of withstanding. And it has put his mind in shackles. Moreover, he has no way to get out of it either. It is no wonder that he said, all these years, I've had to bear all this. And I'm really tired of it now. At this point, Jun Moxie could finally understand the true meaning behind this sentence. He could finally understand the endless pain, grief, and burden that this man has had to bear all these years. Perhaps the only way to unload this burden would be to defeat the third brother of the Jun family, the only remaining of the three great Jun, Jun Xie. But even the chances of this taking place were now slim. Zhao Jianhun had remained undefeated all these years, and although he had seen many victories, but his heart was already overwhelmed. Therefore, he had recklessly followed after Fei Mengchen to the Tianxiang Empire so he could pay his respect to Jun Xie cenotaph. Not for anything else, but just to vent out the pain of his heart. From this point of view, Zhao Jianhun's words regarding taking revenge for Jun Xie's death weren't fake. Because Jun Xie's culprits are the same people who have brought upon this immeasurable pain on him. Taking revenge for Jun Xie would be tantamount to the only outlet he has left to vent out his own anger and suffering. It seems that three princes simply cannot wait to bathe in the springs of imperial power. Jun Xie spoke as they exited the memorial. Moxie. They simply cannot obliterate the Dugu and Jun family. The Dugu family and the Jun family are simply too powerful for these little kids to deal with. And they simply aren't qualified enough to remove us from their paths. However, dealing with just you alone is much simpler. In fact, the chances of success are much higher for them. After all, you are the sole heir to the Jun family. And if you're gone, then no matter how hard your grandfather and I work, no matter how well we place our family, it will all be for nothing. You should take guard in this regard. Uncle, my strength may not be too high, but if they want to kill me, I'm afraid that's easier said than done. Jun Moxie smiled, and then broke into a cynical laughter. I was just manipulating a battle between 6 spirit Xian experts the other night. And even then I was able to move about freely. So what threats do these little assassination tricks carry for me? With the yin-yang escape law, I could even get away if all the 8 great master came for me. However, if they attack me first, then I will not show them any mercy. Jun Moxie's mouth slowly curved into a cruel smile. The 3 princes? Haha. The princes want me dead? That's funny. I'd like to see which of the 3 brothers actually has the courage to come after me. Would I even need to retaliate? Don't show them any mercy. Jun Xie's hair was flying back in the wind, while his eyes seemed a bit faint as he added, but once you attack them, it is necessary that you don't leave any traces behind at any stage. Else it will bring an endless storm. I understand. Jun Moxie's eyes narrowed as he continued to push his uncle's wheelchair forward. Third uncle really isn't afraid of starting trouble, is he? When it comes to being discreet, I believe that there's no one else in the world more capable than I am at it. At this time, a figure was standing at the roof of the opposing building, which suddenly dropped out of sight like an anxious bird flashing away for the fear of getting struck by lightning. The uncle and nephew duo both caught a glimpse of this figure, and immediately became anxious. He was too fast. He's too fast for anyone from my generation. Jun Xie's pupils dilated. Jun Moxie's mind suddenly burst into movement. Although the face wasn't visible, but the smooth flight of the figure was somewhat familiar. It was almost like a hawk was descending down from the heavens above. And in today's world, there was only one man capable of possessing such elegance and speed. And that man was none other than the 8th great master himself, the solitary falcon. Third uncle. That man seems to be an old friend. I'll go and see things out. You please head back. And don't worry about me. Jun Moxie slowly stated as he noted the direction in which that figure had disappeared. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 202. Battle in the Maple Forest. Alright. But you be careful. Jun Xie agreed in a heartbeat. He had already realized that if his nephew wanted to go alone, then he must have his own reasons. Jun Xie was rather confident of his nephew's abilities, and wanted to return to his own personal practice as soon as possible instead of worrying needlessly about his nephew's whereabouts. A few days ago, Jun Moxie had given Jun Xie a detailed outline of a very mysterious swordplay technique, stating that he had accidentally stumbled upon it. Initially, Jun Xie had scoffed at the technique, refusing to believe its validity, but had later realized that the technique was indeed very effective. In fact, Jun Xie was completely taken by this technique, since it was subtler than anything he had ever seen before, and could still be used to impulsively kill off an enemy with a burst of strength. Moreover, this technique was so precise that it was rather difficult to dodge if applied correctly. Jun Moxie had studied several ancient weapons in his previous incarnation, and had sorted out his knowledge to formulate a technique which suited Jun Xie's temperament. Jun Xie had fought in several wars as a younger man, and was cold-blooded but impulsive military general, which made this law a perfect fit for his nature. It was as if the technique was made to his measure. As a result, Jun Xie had been madly trying to learn it. The uncle and nephew duo split up. Jun Moxie was a bit confused since the fray for the Xian Corps had already ended, which meant that all the experts who had previously gathered in the Tianxiang city should have already dispersed by now. However, for some reason, the solitary falcon hadn't left the city yet. The young Master Jun had always known that it was impossible to know the entire story behind any man's actions. But he had already figured out that the solitary falcon was never interested in the Xian Corps itself, and had only come looking to find the right opponents to fight against. He knew well that in case the solitary falcon had been interested in the Xian Corps, then he could have easily escaped with the Xian Corps at any time he wanted to, and no one present on the scene could have obstructed his path. So much so that even the two Xian beasts from the Tianfa forest wouldn't have been able to catch up with him. So, what is he doing here today? Perhaps there's something else in the Tianxiang city which has caught his attention. Could it be that he's found another expert to fight against? Jun Moxie had been racking his brains to get close to the solitary falcon right from the beginning, which is why he had engaged the solitary falcon in such enticing conversations and had offered him such fine wine. However, his plan had to be pushed out ahead of scheduled time, and the unexpected arrival of so many Sky Xian and Spirit Xian experts left Jun Moxie overwhelmed. Later, once the battle for the Xian Corps had terminated, Jun Moxie realized that he could use the help of those two Xian beasts from the Tianfa forest to do his necessary tasks, which meant that he no longer needed the solitary falcon to carry out his immediate plans. As a result, even though he had planned everything very precisely, he was forced to improvise quickly in order to adapt to the quickly changing circumstances. However, the young Master Jun's heart had still been nursing some grievances in this particular regard. I spent so much time and energy in planning everything out, and now it's all gone to waste? What a complete waste of my time and energy! Jun Moxie was a bit disappointed with himself, since he knew that it would be very difficult to track down the solitary falcon once the man had left the Tianxiang city. However, now that Jun Moxie unexpectedly saw the solitary falcon's figure in the Tianxiang city again, he was obviously unwilling to let go of this opportunity. Therefore, the hitman Jun immediately followed after the disappearing master in full speed. The hitman's speed and agility were second to none, but no matter how hard he tried to push himself, he still found himself unable to catch up to the solitary falcon. In fact, the distance between them kept increasing steadily. This is not to say that Jun Moxie was short on skills. His xian qi was still quite low. And although his cultivation had shown a lot of improvement of late, but it was still only equivalent to that of a junior gold xian expert. However, the young Master Jun was confident that after breaking into the second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda, his strength would reach at par with an Earth Xian expert's xian qi as per the Xian continent standards. However, that was to be taken into writing much later. But for now he had already lost sight of the solitary falcon's figure. But still, the hitman didn't give up, and continued on this wild goose chase by pairing his assassin's skills and intuitive abilities with the clues at hand for tracking the solitary falcon down. The maple forest. South of the city. The maple leaves appeared as red as blood in color under the late autumn sunset. The autumn wind was whistling through this seemingly forest of blood, and it seemed as if the thousands of maple leaves which had once adorned the branches of the trees of this forest were no longer able to resist the force of the wind and were falling and flowing in it, making them seem like waves of blood surging up and down a sea of blood. The entire horizon seemed to be painted in blood. One blue-robed lonesome figure was standing quietly in the wind. And although he was standing motionlessly on his spot, but his fluttering robes made it seem as if his body was an embodiment of a turbulent sea with waves rolling up and down, roaring and rippling endlessly. The azure blue color of this man's robes was complementing the deep red color of the forest in background, and it seemed to be creating a strange but serene, hostile but peaceful picture. His azure hair was raised in the wind, and seemed to be merging into the blue sky above. Although numerous leaves were falling to ground, but the ones around him would inevitably circle around him, and his blue hair didn't seem to have been contaminated by them at all. His eyes were calm and composed, with no hints of sadness for the road behind, no desires or hope for the one ahead, no panic, and no fear. This man was Hai Chen-fong. Being a true friend, Hai Chen-fong had showed up as promised, to meet this unknown but unparalleled enemy for his friend's cause. His eyes were poised eastwards, and he seemed to staring at the horizon in the hope of catching a glimpse of his hometown beyond the sea, where his master was waiting for his return. Once this battle is over, will I get an opportunity to return home again? Woo! A fierce autumn wind breezed through the sky, and it seemed as if a meteor had fallen from the sky and its sudden impact upon landing to ground had made the wind gush away from it. Hai Chen-fong squinted his eyes as a ray of azure blue light flashed from his body and he stood rooted to his spot, steady as a rock. But his hair started to flutter in wind behind his body, while the maple leaves tilted backwards and sped past, and away from his body. The tens of millions of leaves which had somehow managed to brave the autumn winds until now, finally gave in and were caught up in the powerful force of this wind, flooding the sky with their blood-red radiance. The red and the blue sea had been suddenly separated from each other. Hai Fengchen suddenly seemed to standing alone in the frame, with no one around him, and no support. It almost seemed as if all the strenuous effort he had previously put into picking a favorable geographical position had been neutralized in an instant. Hai Fengchen's facial expression changed almost instantaneously while his hand found its way to the hilt of his sword as he looked upwards to search for his enemy, but saw no one. There was no enemy in sight. This unknown man hadn't even appeared in flesh yet, but had already deliberated Hai Fengchen into using his xian qi. Whoosh! A black figure appeared in a flash at a high altitude in the sky above in front of Hai Fengchen. The man descended to about 10 feet in the air, but the manner in which the winds were breezing past his robes made him seem more like a hawk than a human. His long hair were flowing down by his shoulders. His spine was as straight as a spear. His eyes seemed as crisp as lightning. His nose and lips resembled that of an eagle. His face was thin, and it almost seemed as if his entire body was a personification of death. He appeared like the overlord of the sky, just waiting for his next prey, like a hawk looking down on a rabbit. Is Your Excellency the one who picked on the Jin Yongbang? Hai Chen-fong took a deep breath and asked in a respectful tone. His Sky Xian intuition had already made him aware that he was no match for this man in front of him. Yes. And you are Jin Feng Lai's hired help? And a Sky Xian expert at that? Yes. Yes. That's good. That's very good. The man in the black gown glanced at Hai Chen-feng as his face became ardent with desire. Hai Chen-feng's heart was already beating like a drum. His cultivation is simply too high for me. What level has he already reached? He's at least a spirit Xian expert. Ah. Even though Hai Chen-feng was a toughened Sky Xian expert at heart, he still didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Although he expected this person to be quite strong, and maybe even stronger than himself, but he had absolutely never imagined that this man would simply be beyond his ability to cope up with. This person is so strong that I believe that even Master wouldn't be able to defeat him easily. But there are only a very handful of people who have progressed that far, so who is this person? The real reason why Hai Fengchen didn't know whether to laugh or cry was, since this person has already progressed this far, why would he stir up trouble with a small faction like the Jin Yongbang gang? If such a person had asked something from Jin Feng Lai, then Jin Feng Lai should have offered him everything he possessed, but instead he has managed to annoy this man. What is this? The man in the black gown smiled coldly. However, being just a Sky Xian expert, you've actually dared to challenge me. Ha ha. Good. Good. At least you have courage. Justice is to be found everywhere. And so I had to. Even through mountains of daggers and seas of flame, one mustn't look back. Hai Fengchen stated in a genuine tone as he respectfully folded his hands. Sir, I request that you leave my friends be. And in case I've offended you, I request that you forgive me. I never do. The man in black laughed loudly. His voice seemed rather weird, almost as if an eagle was chanting. I came to the Tianxiang city in search of something, and the purpose of my trip has been fulfilled, and was quite productive. Therefore, I was about to leave without bothering about this nonsense with the Jin Yongbang gang. But just as that was about to happen, I received your challenge for a battle. It looks like people sometimes just get lucky. Ah. Since your objective has already been accomplished, why not leave this matter be, sir? Hai Chen-feng sighed, and then added, Your Excellency has indicated that you were only interested in the competition for the Xian Corps, right? The man in black groaned, almost as if someone had hit a wrong note. And his face suddenly became gloomy. He batted his eyelids, and said, Just because that's over means that we won't fight? That's nonsense. Today I'm going to teach you a lesson. You need to note, there are some people you simply shouldn't provoke. And since you've provoked one, you must pay the corresponding price. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 203. As it turns out. So my senior wishes to bully me? Well, in that case, I request that we greet each other for a fight. The innate arrogance of Hai Chen-feng took control of his better judgment, and he thought to himself, since you know that you're stronger than me, you think you can just bully me around by using sheer force? I would rather die at your hands before I let you intimidate me. Whatever the outcome, Hai Chen-feng is also the disciple of one of the 8 great masters. You really think you can frighten me that easily? It must be mentioned that the Blue Master, Meng Hongchen, was a rather reclusive and odd character, and never talked to his disciples about the outside world. He had defeated the solitary falcon several years ago in a rather secluded battlefield. And therefore Hai Chen-feng naturally didn't see the fight. In fact, he hadn't even heard too many rumors about it. So much so that Hai Chen-feng actually hadn't been able to recognize the man he was confronted with, and had no idea that this man was as renowned as his own master, and was another one of the 8 great master, the solitary falcon. Haha. There's no need for such formalities. This battle was predestined by the heavens. The solitary falcon laughed loudly and then suddenly dashed downwards as swiftly as the clouds, and extended his palm to strike his enemy. Hai Chen-feng grunted angrily, and then unsheathed his azure blue sword speedily with a whoosh. Bang! The solitary falcon's right hand collided with Hai Chen-feng's sword, and the collision gave rise to a loud noise. Hai Chen-feng's heart was left amazed since he had barely ever come across someone as amazing as this man he was confronted with, although the collision was equally matched. He could sense that the man in front was much stronger than him since even though the collision was equally matched, it was still a bare hand against a sword, which obviously meant that in case he tried to use fist techniques to fight against this enemy, he'd have no chance of winning the battle. A storm of doubt started emerging within his heart as he began comprehending the enormity of his situation. He could clearly tell that he was no match for the man in front, but still had no idea why his opponent wasn't taking the initiative to take the upper hand. There was a special reason as to why the solitary falcon had been roaming around, looking for someone to fight with. Over these last few years, he had mostly spent his entire time training atop snow-cladded mountain peaks, having chosen eagles and falcons as his opponents, and had been slowly learning from their flight trajectories, their fighting styles, their hunting tactics, their attacking postures, owing to which he had been able to evolve his original, the 9 eagles style into a more profound and much more powerful set of strokes, the 17 eagles. This set of strokes were powerful, but since this style was still in the early phases of its development, it was far from being a proper style, and the linkage between different strokes had been giving the solitary falcon a headache like no other. Hence, the solitary falcon decided to seek out worthy opponents since it would help him in understanding the deficiencies of his style, and moreover would pave the way to making the necessary improvements to his style. However, he hadn't been able to achieve his objective so far. He was well aware that the other great masters weren't sitting idly either, which is why he knew that they wouldn't assist him with his idea. Or perhaps he just didn't want them to see the tail of this emerging dragon. Therefore, he naturally wasn't left with many known options. Moreover, the other great masters were all slightly stronger than the solitary falcon, and when it came to a real battle, he'd have to use his tried and testing moves rather than these experimental ones, which made the thought of provoking them on intention a completely meaningless suggestion. All this had rendered the solitary falcon completely helpless in his current venture. The possibility of using Feng Wanyun for his experiments was still a more plausible alternative, but any encounter between these two mortal enemies was bound to be a battle between life and death. In such a situation, the solitary falcon would obviously find it very difficult to practice his new styles, since it would mean only one of two things. He'd either get bullied, or he'd end up courting his death. Moreover, even if he was capable of assuring his safety, he still didn't wish to leak out this new and secret style to Feng Wanyun. The solitary falcon wanted to prove his superiority to Feng Wanyun, and was rather hoping that this new style would help him in achieving his objective one day. Apart from these options, there weren't too many people left in the world who could possibly qualify to contend against him. The solitary falcon did contemplate the idea of going into the Tianfa forest to polish his style, but the thought of the power that watches over the Tianfa forest was enough to make him reconsider, and he had eventually decided against going there. I'd end up into a Xian beast's shit if I go there. At the end of his tether, The solitary falcon decided to follow the only remaining workaround, casually fight whoever he could find. No matter who the person was. As long as the man was a famed expert, the solitary falcon would try to seek the said person out in order to combat against them. Even if the man was a disciple of the great masters, since these men in particular would be better trained and would have superior knowledge of their skills, they would only help him in polishing his new style better. As a result, the solitary falcon had been traveling north and south, constantly seeking out known experts. However, he had been very disheartened in the recent past upon realizing one thing: after fighting these so-called 100 or so experts, not only had he not been able to enhance his skills, his expertise with this new style had actually seen a decline. The reason behind this unwanted result obviously wasn't very difficult to analyze. It is just as it happens in a game of chess. When one plays a weaker opponent repeatedly, one eventually tends to decline from their prime. In this state of gloom, the solitary falcon accidentally came across the rumor surrounding the Xian core, and then immediately decided to travel all the way to the Tianxiang city to catch up with this entire situation in time. However, just when he was finally able to find exactly what his heart had been craving for, two extremely powerful Xian beasts came out of nowhere and stole the Xian core in front of his eyes. It was needless to say that this incident was greatly detrimental to both Shi Changxiao and the solitary falcon's interests. Shi Changxiao's trip to the Tianxiang city hadn't been a long one, but the strenuous effort that the solitary falcon had taken to cover this long road had completely gone down the drain. The solitary falcon's mind was completely imbalanced even the next day, and he eventually decided to go up to Shi Changxiao's doorstep, looking for trouble. However, upon reaching the man's camp, he was made aware that the great master had already left the previous night. Extremely dejected by the way things had turned out, the solitary falcon decided to leave as well. As for his original plan of using the Jin Yang Bang gang, if there's no decent expert in this city anymore, then what's the point of using that Jin Yang Bang gang now? All that useless gang was supposed to do for me was to locate high-quality experts I could fight against. But now that the Xian core is gone, what good would they be able to do for me? However, he had never expected that he would actually receive a war challenge from the Jin Yang Bang gang's hired hand. The initially dejected solitary falcon had finally found an outlet to vent out his frustration. He charged towards this maple forest animatedly to vent out his grief, and was in turn left overjoyed. He could clearly see that the man in front was a disciple of none other than the Blue Master himself. Moreover, this man had already reached the peak of the Sky Xian realm. It was almost as if the heavens had listened to his prayers. Moreover, it was rather obvious that this man didn't seem to recognize the solitary falcon. The initially frustrated master was left thanking his stars. Therefore, the solitary falcon naturally decided against rashly exposing his true identity for the fear that this man may kneel down to his knees screaming, "Master," which would obviously be detrimental to his personal agenda. Hence, he withheld this key information since he wanted to fight this man. This person clearly seems to be a disciple of the Blue Master, and since he's already reached the peak of the Sky Xian realm, it could be presumed that he's one of the best disciples Meng Hongchen has ever trained. If I can have a good and hearty battle with this man, then I believe that I'll be able to find the inspiration I've been seeking all along. Therefore, he deliberately decided to suppress his real strength even though the opposition was fighting in full swing, and soon the two of them had exchanged at least a dozen blows. At this moment, an uninvited guest arrived at the scene. This uninvited guest was obviously the young Master Jun. Although the young Master Jun was an expert beyond match when it came to tracking people, but he had been racking his brain to no avail initially since the solitary falcon was no ordinary man either. However, It really didn't take his expertise to locate the solitary falcon in the end, since it wasn't awfully difficult to spot a sky full of drifting red leaves. The young Master Jun quickly concealed himself nearby and started gazing at the solitary falcon as if the man was bullying a young child. However, Jun Moxie simply couldn't help but admire the man's dedication. Even though he is one of the 8 great masters, he really isn't worried about taking the rogue road. As he continued to watch the solitary falcon's fight with this blue-robed man, he suddenly realized something really strange. Even though the solitary falcon seemed to doing his utmost, he still seemed a bit overwhelmed. However, as Jun Moxie continued to watch the fight, he started to realize that the solitary falcon was repeating the same strokes again and again in a loop, and wasn't making any attempts to use any variations at all. On the other hand, the man in blue was using a plethora of skills and styles, and was basically going all out. It seemed to him as if this great master was actually just using this blue-robed man as a dummy for his personal practice. The solitary falcon's body didn't seem to be moving much. In fact, his legs were completely immobile. His hands, on the other hand, were moving in weird manners. He'd sometimes extend his arms wide. Sometimes he'd stretch them forward. He was opening and closing his palms in very weird styles as well. Jun Moxie continued to watch for a long time, and a strange sense that something was amiss kept growing stronger and stronger in heart. Suddenly a thought emerged inside his brain. This is clearly the solitary falcon's homemade style. And this style has been inspired by the body of an eagle or a goshawk. This is a bit too obvious. But what's even more obvious is that even though he has created this technique, he hasn't yet perfected its system. He could tell from the manner in which these strokes were designed that each stroke of this style had a dedicated line of power in support. And even though these moves seemed very strange at first, but once perfected could produce a tremendous amount of power. Jun Moxie silently counted thrice, and was finally able to determine that the style contained a total of 17 strokes. The solitary falcon was using the entire style in a single sequence. Hence it wasn't very hard for him to determine the total count of moves in the style. Although this style was capable of producing a large amount of power, but it seems that he has his heart set on not killing his opponent, which is why he is deliberately suppressing his strength to adjust his output to a mediocre level. But in case he was using this style to contest against a man of equal strength, he wouldn't be able to keep up. However, coping up with someone much weaker than himself is much easier for him, since even if the opponent occasionally tears a hole in his style, he can easily make up for the loss. Moreover, the hitman could tell from his experience that in case the solitary falcon employed his complete strength in using this style, he could easily produce a much more powerful strike. But the solitary falcon wasn't doing it on purpose. Even though he was using his true strength to defend himself, he didn't seem to be using it to attack. Jun Moxie suddenly realized why the solitary falcon wasn't interested in the Xian core, but had still come all the way to the Tianxiang city. Why the solitary falcon was so eager to fight, but still wasn't interested in fighting an expert of equal ability. This is the reason behind all of it. Haha. Why didn't I see it earlier? As he continued to watch the style which the solitary falcon was developing, he couldn't help feeling a bit nervous. Each move and action of the solitary falcon's style seemed strange, but vaguely familiar. Jerky, too raw. It can be said that these moves can be turned into something very powerful, but at the moment these moves can only be best described as the 17 loose strokes. It lacks polishing, and cannot yet be called a proper martial style, but it's already good enough to be brought into a prototype stage. The solitary falcon's moves seem very similar to the actions of an eagle. The wingspan stroke, the soaring eagle stroke, the charging eagle stroke, the rabbit fighting stroke, and these I will work upon. And after a very systematic study, once I'm done tampering with all his strokes, I'll make them far more powerful. Ha ha ha. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 204. Burning both jade and common stone. Jun Xie was keenly watching the solitary falcon's new style, and felt that even though the style was still unrefined, and not even properly linked yet, but the individual strokes of this style were extremely sophisticated. Maybe not as good as the ones he had studied in his previous incarnation, but it was still more powerful in its make. Since this style used the martial artist's Xian Qi, it was capable of producing an amazing amount of power, which had left Jun Xie both mulling over its merits and admiring it at the same time. What was even more mesmerizing was that, even though the solitary falcon was repeating the same moves again and again, he was making subtle changes in each successive round, and was gradually eliminating the weakness of this new style. Therefore, once he was able to practice this method for a sufficiently long duration, he might actually be able to eliminate the flaws in the system, and might actually be able to get the style battle ready. It must be mentioned that learning and creating a martial arts are completely different from each other. Creating a martial arts style from a scratch requires a great amount of work, since the style needs to be revised again and again, and the creator cannot even skip a single step in its process. This whole process takes several decades, and can sometimes take the effort of generations together before the complete and polished technique is finally ready. This concept was no different in this ancient world either, but the solitary falcon had still abandoned the traditional martial styles, and was working on creating his own custom style at a very quick pace, which clearly exhibited his expertise and wisdom in the world of martial arts. And this feat of his was something the future generations to come would benefit from. The style he was trying to create could be regarded as an epoch-making breakthrough. Just this one aspect alone was enough to regard the solitary falcon as one that ate great masters, but moreover, a genius craftsman and scholar. From another perspective, although the man was already regarded as one of legendary masters of his time, he was still willing to drop from his status and descend to fighting a man who could only be described as ordinary and unworthy in his eyes, just so he could improve and perfect this style he was trying to create, a feat which not many people would be capable of doing. Hang on a second. An idea sprouted inside Jun Xie's mind. The solitary falcon is trying hard to find suitable opponents, but hasn't been able to. The Shui Han Manor and the Silver Blizzard City would surely qualify as suitable opponents, right? The solitary falcon is racking his brain to improve his style right now, but I've also learned some similar styles in my previous life. The pouncing eagle, the hissing eagle, 9 eagles transformation. If I don't use these resources, then wouldn't they just go waste? That truly would be a real waste of them. Jun Xie's apprehensive mind suddenly eased up a lot. The solitary falcon, on the other hand, was constantly altering his strokes, but was still keeping the battle in equilibrium. However, his mind was completely occupied in figuring out new ways to make his strokes more linked and coherent. Moreover, casting out the same moves again and again was slowly making him more and more familiar with them, along with gradually improving his style and its efficiency. Although the process was extremely slow, but the man was still enjoying it to the utmost. This world was very different from the one Jun Xie had come from, since martial strength revolved around Xian Qi in this world. Although Xian Qi was quite powerful and intense in its own merit, but its explosive nature and delicate functioning limited the styles one could practice, which is why a vast majority of the martial artists used basic moves supplemented by their Xian Qi to contest a battle, and would rarely use more complex styles. In essence, Unless a martial artist had a large arsenal of tricks, he would continue to use the same strokes again and again. If one pursued speed and power at the same time, then Xian Qi was unlikely to keep up. And in case one focused on endurance, then they couldn't use complex or bulky moves. However, even though the solitary falcon's style was still quite raw, but it was very different from this general approach. Once this technique was gradually improved and perfected, it would emerge as a pioneering work in shaping the future of martial arts. In fact, it could even be said that his work could even pave the way to bridging the gap between the present and the future. On the other hand, Hai Chen Feng was abnormally calm while his sword continued to hack, chop, cut, slash. He was vividly demonstrating some of the most exceptional moves of the Blue Master himself, and would often suppress his enemy on occasion, but the man in black would always stabilize himself again. With the passage of time, Hai Chen Feng started to realize that his initial advantage of having a better arsenal of tricks had actually reduced, while the initially abundant flaws in the opposition's style were now becoming hard to find. Moreover, the opposition would once in a while counter heavily, and would completely destabilize him. Their battle had reached a point where the situation had completely reversed, and now Hai Chen Feng was doing his utmost to fight, and was in turn sweating all over, while his breathing was becoming increasingly unstable. On the other hand, his opponent was breathing far more stably, and his style was becoming more and more efficient, and it seemed evident that the man was capable of finishing off Hai Chen Feng anytime he wanted to, but still wasn't. It seemed as if this man in black was some heavenly steed soaring across the skies with no purpose at all. Else Hai Chen Feng would have already died several times by now. This battle between these two experts was becoming more and more dangerous with every passing minute. It must be mentioned that danger and intensity are two completely different concepts with respect of a martial battle. Intensity is a term used to define a fierce battle between two equally matched opponents, where each side is doing their utmost to win, and in such a case, unless the fight reaches its climax and both sides start taking risks to win the fight is unlikely to result in causality. However, in a general case, the probability of fatality is extremely small since both the parties are likely to have already exhausted their energies before reaching the climax, making them both ineffective in delivering a fatal blow. However, danger is a completely different concept in this regard. It pertains to a fight between two unmatched opponents since the weaker side is incapable of preventing any harm to himself. And such was the circumstance Hai Chen Feng had landed himself in at the moment. His opponent was no other than the great master, Solitary Falcon himself. And even though the Solitary Falcon had his heart set on not injuring his practicing partner initially, but as his mind was becoming more and more engrossed with his research, it seemed that he was beginning to fight more and more instinctively. Although he was still control his Xian Qi, and was maintaining the same level as Hai Chen Feng in this regard, but he was still a legendary master, and Hai Chen Feng was simply no match for him in any respect. Although Hai Chen Feng wouldn't exactly perish in the blink of an eye anytime soon, but the difference in their expertise was becoming a bit too obvious now. Hai Chen Feng had already given up on winning this fight by a fluke, and had moreover realized one very important thing. This man has been playing around with me from the very beginning. Since that's the case, I'll teach him a good lesson, even if I die doing it. Hai Chen Feng was a peak sky Xian expert in his own merit, and had rarely ever come across anyone worthy of being his match, which had obviously given rise to arrogance and self-esteem. However, at the moment, he found himself being transformed into a play toy of another, which was bringing more shame to his name than he was capable of washing away. In his eyes, this situation was very similar to that of a cat playing with a mouse, where the cat was just trying to exhaust the mouse before killing it. He could clearly sense that his situation was similar to that game of chess there, even though his opponent was capable of finishing the game in one move. The opponent was still dallying around until the point where the weaker side was completely exhausted and humiliated. Such a mischievous strategy was easy to play out against a novice player. But in case the man on the wrong end of the curve was an expert in his own right, such a situation was likely to drive the man mad. Hai Chen-feng's predicament was roughly the same, and it seemed as if he had no way out of his plight. However, Hai Chen-feng still had a secret trick in his arsenal. Hai Chen-feng unexpectedly started moving his sword back and forth in circle, and suddenly starting building a hurricane-like structure around the solitary falcon. The winds constituting this air storm started becoming blue in color slowly, and gradually started deepening in their shade. With each consequent circle he made, the hurricane became even deeper in shade, and slowly went from sky blue, to deep blue, to azure, and then almost to the color of ink. The solitary falcon had been extremely pleased with this experience so far, since he had been able to achieve exactly what his heart desired. At this time, he suddenly felt an increase in the pressure around him, and before he could make a move, it seemed as if he had been surrounded by a sea of tides, almost as if the torrential rains had started pouring over a trapped boat, while the real storm lay approaching. He suddenly realized what was happening as he remembered the Blue Master's signature skill, the Wave of the World. This trick will cause destruction indiscriminately. It will burn both jade and common stone alike. This maneuver was capable of exploding out one's Xian Qi, and could mobilize the entire Xian Qi in one's Dan Tian, and then turn it into one explosive and lethal strike. This particular skill was capable of assisting the user to surpass the gap in realms by at least 1 or 2 layers, perhaps even more. And with the help of this explosive attack, one could even kill an enemy much stronger than oneself in one swoop, even if the enemy was 1 or 2 layers ahead. However, this maneuver had one basic drawback. That is, no matter the enemy's injuries, the user would turn to toast. Before injuring the enemy, the user would hurt himself, and whether or not the enemy survives the strike, the user would be foreordained to death. The solitary falcon cursed out in shock, "You be *starred. You're courting your death." "I'm solitary." He wanted to say, "I'm solitary falcon, your brother master." However, the solitary falcon's words were interrupted by a burst of laughter from Hai Chen-feng, who shouted back at him in a grief-stricken tone, "You old be *starred. Now you're afraid of it? You will now know the mistake you've made." He continued to rotate his sword around in circles, and it seemed like his sword was at the center of a turbulent sea, giving rise to monstrous waves. This storm had already started making clank sounds, almost as if a legendary dragon was hissing his last and angry dying breaths. His sword continued to move in circles, making the whirlwind sounds even louder and noisier. Suddenly, a white light flashed, which was shortly followed by loud sound, and it was evident that a thunderbolt had originated in the sky above, which was now piercing through the sky, and was decisively crashing downwards. The solitary falcon was left dumbstruck. The solitary falcon was left anxious and gloomy by this approaching strike, and violently cursed out, "You little be *starred. Quickly stop this madness. Or else, I'll go and seek out Meng Hongchen after I'm done with you. I will settle this score with him for giving his secret technique to a madman like you. You're not just mad. You're an idiot too. I'm the solitary falcon. You need to stop this." The solitary falcon's intestines were already full with regret, since he could sense that the situation had already gone beyond the point of reversal at this stage. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 205. Request me. I'll save him. It wasn't that the solitary falcon was afraid of getting hurt. Unless the Blue Master himself casted out this skill, the solitary falcon wouldn't be in any danger of getting hurt. The gap between the solitary falcon and Hai Chen Feng was so huge that the wave of the world, maneuver simply couldn't close it down. Let alone dying. The solitary falcon wasn't even likely to get hurt by this attack. However, the solitary falcon was still afraid of this attack coming into play even though he was in no danger of getting hurt. It's all over now. All the fun that I could have had is now over. I could have learnt so much more from this fight. But now this guy has inadvertently forced it all to an end. But what will I tell Meng Hongchen when he comes looking for answers? That I forced his disciple to his death while conducting my training? That I've become a murderer? Meng Hongchen will not let go of me for this one. He'll fight me to death. But what can I do now? Hai Chen Feng had also heard the solitary falcon's words, and had suddenly become even angrier. You old B***starred. Why didn't you say this earlier? This ship has already sailed. And I've already burnt out all the energy in my dantian. The arrow has already been released from the bow. Now it's impossible to stop this. I'm toast. At this moment, Hai Chen Feng felt as if he was dying under the most persecutive circumstances known to this world. There are no words to describe the injustice of this world. This man is actually my master brother, the solitary falcon. What is this Ned B***starred saying? Why didn't he say it earlier? Why didn't he tell me that he's at the peak of the spirit Xian realm? Had I recognized him earlier, I would have fled without thinking twice about it. I'm nothing in front of a man like him. I only cast out this attack to teach him a lesson, but this won't do anything to him at all. But I'll die for sure. Hai Chen Feng was depressed beyond measure. However, no matter how much he wanted to stop it, no matter how much he cursed, the wave of the world attack was now beyond the point of recall. Solitary Falcon was as angry as Hai Chen Feng was, and was incessantly scolding and abusing the man along with this maneuver in his heart as well. The solitary Falcon's state of helplessness was visible in his eyes, while his anxiety was evidently being displayed on his face. What do I do now? I should kill him. At least this boy's corpse will be preserved if I kill him before his attack does. Bang! Boom! A cloud of dust fused with the air in an instant, covering the sky in its dark, so much so that even the blue-colored sky wasn't visible anymore. The solitary falcon's strikes had sent Hai Chen Feng flying out of this dust cloud like a kite without a thread. The dust settled down in a few moments, leaving a sad-faced solitary falcon staring at his hands with a gloomy emotion in his heart, and one could see that he could break into tears at any moment. What is this? Hai Chen Feng was lying flat on the ground a few feet away. His mouth was stained in his own blood, while his chest was only falling and rising very slightly. Anyone could tell that this person was breathing his last breaths, and almost nothing could bring him back to life at this point. Hai Chen Feng's face was reveled in very strange expression, and it seemed as if he was crying, but was still laughing at the same time. This was a very strange expression for someone who was on the verge of his demise. At this point, Hai Chen Feng had no more strength left in him, so much so that he couldn't even lift his fingers anymore. However, he was still trying to move his mouth a bit, but wasn't succeeding at it either. It could be estimated that he probably wanted to laugh at his own fate once, and would have then cursed out loudly. Numerous Sky Xian experts have died since the inception of time, so what's the big deal with me? Why do I feel so wronged? Why? Why? Damn it. This is way of life. but I was born under some ill-fated star. Given Hai Qinfeng's situation, the solitary falcon had intentionally suppressed his own strength while casting out this fatal attack since he wanted to preserve the man's body. Else a man of the solitary falcon was more than capable of turning Hai Qinfeng's body to dust if he desired it. The solitary falcon was covering his face with his hands since he didn't wish to see Hai Qinfeng's current situation. There is no hope for him now. I'm really unlucky. Why did this happen to me? I really don't know if this whole scenario was good or bad in the end, and what on earth am I going to tell Meng Hongchen when I meet him next time? Why did my life have to be so bitter? The solitary falcon looked up once again with some hope in his eyes, but then suddenly looked down again, knowing that all was already lost. He turned around in a fit of rage and kicked a tree, and sent it flying away into the air. Haha. You think that you've sent your brother disciple to his death in your training exercise? Nope. He's just playing dead. Or perhaps he's just practicing to be dead. Suddenly a voice rang at a distance, but with a hint of mockery in it. Whichever it is, you are indeed worthy of being called a great master. I really admire you. Really, I do. The solitary falcon was already depressed enough to lose his mind, and this sentence made him completely furious in an instant. And so he angrily cursed out, "You son of a b*tch. Get lost. I know it's you, Chang Xiao. You old green turtle." As far as the solitary falcon was concerned, there was only one man inside the Tianxiang city who was capable of talking to him in this manner. And that man was obviously Chang Xiao. But wait, hasn't he already left? Then who is this guy? Is somebody playing a joke on me? The atmosphere was completely silent, while the solitary falcon was completely enraged. And just when he was about to curse out again, he was suddenly shocked to see a black entity in front of him. A black masked man, who he didn't seem to recognize, was squatting right there in front of him with one hand holding Hai Qinfeng's wrist, seemingly counting his pulse rate, paying no attention to the solitary falcon. And the distance between this black masked man and the solitary falcon was less than 3 meters. The solitary falcon was just about to hurl out a few more abuses, but abruptly held them back in his stomach. The solitary falcon had always been considered the fastest and the most agile man in the entire world, and had always believed that no man would ever be able to match up to his expertise in this regard at least. The solitary falcon's speed and agility were second to none, and this fact was recognized by everyone in the world. That being said, it could be estimated that even Yun Bei Chen wouldn't be capable of coming this close to him without him finding out about it. Who is this black masked man? The solitary falcon had goosebumps all over his body in an instant. He got within 3 meters of me without me noticing anything at all. Is this person a monster or ghost of some sort? Since this person was able to get this close to me so quietly, he obviously wouldn't be some roadside expert, right? Since when was such a powerful master born in this world? This trick is too fierce. It actually required a man to shatter his own dantian in order to simulate the full potential of one's life force. It is a really cruel technique. Unfortunately, the stone has been burnt, but the jade is still unharmed. The black masked man continued, "This boy's resolve is very strong. I like it. If this old man hadn't stepped forward, then you would have actually ended up killing your brother disciple." This, brother, what do you mean? He can still be saved. The remark had left the solitary falcon so overjoyed that he was unable to speak up without stammering. Don't say that. He hasn't died yet. This old man is here now, and I could save him even if he was already bending over his death. Okay, the black masked man rolled his eyes. Now don't speak another word. A number of dense black lines creased on the solitary falcon's forehead. There was no man in this entire world who could speak to him with such contempt in their tone, especially if the person already knew his real identity. Well? What are you still standing there for? It's irritating me. The black-masked man spoke up unceremoniously. Good. Go ahead. Disturb me. But then should I just let your disciple die? Quickly roll away from me. Else I'll walk away from this without caring about his life. The solitary falcon's face turned red, almost the same shade as a falcon's backside. And without saying another word, he heavily took a few steps back. Then he said, if you don't cure him, then I'll make you pay for it with your life. Oh really? You dare to threaten this old man? Looks like you've got a lot of courage. Ah, the black-masked man calmly stood up. I'm not going to cure him now. He just stood there with his arms folded, contemptuously looking at the solitary falcon. You will make me pay with my life? Come on. This old man wants to see what skill a great master like yourself possess that can make me pay for something with my life. You think you're invincible because you're one of the 8 great masters. Ah. I spit on the likes of you. The solitary falcon stared back at the man so ferociously that it seemed that his eyeballs would pop out of their sockets, while his chest was drumming heavily from anger, and it seemed as if he'd start vomiting blood at any moment. This was already beyond the limit of any insult he'd ever suffered. The solitary falcon almost wanted to roar out loudly, I'm going to kill you. However, after much deliberation, he decided that if Hai Chen Feng's life could be saved, then it was more important to get that done first, and then he could always sort out his personal differences later. Otherwise, once the death of a young generation expert was pinned to the name of a great master, then he would fall from his position and status in no time at all. What do you want me to do? The solitary falcon forcibly suppressed his anger. Quickly start saving him. I'm not going to bother you. Stop dilly-dallying around. Seeing that Hai Chen Feng's breathing was becoming more and more weak, the solitary falcon started glaring at the black-masked man, but his tone seemed extremely urgent. Request me. The black-masked man's arms were still folded as he stated calmly, request me to save him. I was only taking the pain of saving him because he seemed pleasing to my eyes. But now you've started talking, and I don't find you pleasing at all. So I won't save him unless you request me to. I request, the solitary falcon whispered a few words, unable to come up with the strength to speak up any louder, nor able to believe that he was being asked to plead somebody. And it seemed rather obvious from his facial expression that he seemed trapped in a case where you give someone an inch and the person starts asking for a mile. The black-masked man snorted, and then turned around and started walking away without showing any traces of reluctance. Stop! The solitary falcon was covered in sweat from top to bottom, and was barely able to speak up this one word. This situation surrounding Hai Chen Feng had already ashamed him to his core. Therefore, even if it wasn't for Meng Hongchen's sake, he still couldn't allow Hai Chen Feng to die. Old man. I request you, old man. Please save him. The solitary falcon was grinding his teeth so hard at this moment that his cheeks had gone red, and his eyes were staring at the man in front so sharply that it seemed as if he'd eat that man alive. Even the waters from 5 rivers would never be enough to wash away this shame I've had to endure today. I could live through my entire life, but I'll never be able to wash away this shame, and I'll probably take this shame with me to the heavens above. The black-masked man snorted, deviously looked at him once again, and then pointed a finger in his direction. You think your request means something to me simply because you have the title of the 8th great master. Ah. I was about to start working on saving his life. And then you threaten me with my life? What kind of rubbish is filled inside your head? Ah. You need to flood your head with water someday. The solitary falcon was breathing so heavily that the wind coming out his nostrils was forceful enough to swirl the leaves on the ground around in circles, while the manner in which he was gnashing his teeth clearly expressed his desire to chop this man into two, and then split his stomach open, break every bone in his body, one by one, and then make him eat his shattered bones until his stomach was full, and then watch as his bones turned to feces inside his stomach. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 206. Breakthrough. The solitary falcon turned around and faced the other side, and one could tell that he had no interest in turning back around either. Moreover, it seemed from facial expression that he was dying to rip open that black-masked man's head. That stupid bird-fighting move has brought him to such a point where he's completely obsessed with it. He probably just goes around every day looking for shrimps he can fight with, and he thinks that it will help him in becoming a legendary master someday. The black-masked man seemed to be thinking out loud, it's only a set of 17 strokes, and even they aren't properly linked yet. It's just sad, ah. What a shame, ah. And he actually has the nerve to call himself one of the 8 great masters. Someone needs to put that boy's head in its place. The solitary falcon turned around the moment he heard these words, and looked up at the man behind that mask with a faint hint of surprise in his eyes. You, what did you just say? What did I just say? I said you're doing it all wrong. The black-masked man rolled his eyes. You think that your silly, so-called, fighting style can sum up the hundreds of different maneuvers that a bird does? You haven't been able to figure it out completely yet, and due to your lack of knowledge, that eagle fighting style of yours is closer to being fly fighting style. It's no surprise you can't produce any real power with it. And then, you're actually being complacent with such a silly technique? It's just shameful, and plainly ridiculous. This time, even though the black-masked man's tone was far worse and more demeaning than it was previously, but each word that came out of his mouth drummed the solitary falcon's ear and forced him to reconsider his initial judgments. As a result, instead of becoming even more rebellious this time, he felt as if someone had pulled him down from his celestial status and thrashed him to ground with a thud. Please advise me, sir, the solitary falcon stated respectfully. As far as he was concerned, he was able to point out my shortcomings in an instant. Therefore he obviously must be someone very senior, right? He has to be someone from my senior generation, ah. At this point, the solitary falcon suddenly put aside his personal arrogance and ego. First you cool down. Once I'm done saving him, I'll take another look at your little trick, and see if it's worth my time or not. The black-masked man stated in an indifferent tone. Yes. The solitary falcon immediately turned around, sat down on the ground, and stated meditating. The black-masked man leisurely squatted down on the ground, comfortably hummed twice, and then once again grabbed Hai Chen Feng's wrist. The 8th great master, ah. Wow. Who can dare to teach him a fighting style? I can. And once I'm done training him, I will have his respect. I'm the Master Supreme. I'm the best. The man in the black mask was obviously the young Master Jun Moxie. That being said, Hai Chen Feng's injury was indeed very serious, and would be regarded as untreatable at this point in this world without advanced medicine. However, with the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune in his arsenal, it was something that Jun Moxie could fix, since quite easily this injury wasn't even as serious as Jun Wuyi's. However, because this injury was fresh, and since the man was in a critical situation at this point, the young Master Jun would obviously need to be very careful. Of course, in case this task was being undertaken by any other person apart from Jun Moxie, then Hai Chen Feng would surely die. Jun Moxie started the Hongjun Pagoda into motion, and an awe-inspiring aura started surging through his body. Then he directed this aura into his palm, and started infusing it into Hai Chen Feng's meridians, and started repairing his broken meridians bit by bit, and then went on to renew the linkages between his Xian Qi flow paths, and then slowly proceeded to repairing the damage inside his Dantian. Hai Chen Feng's face, which seemed deathly pale earlier, slowly started becoming rosier in shade, while his body started to shift a bit and he started moaning aloud, initially incapable of even opening his eyes properly. Hai Chen Feng was now watching this man in behind the black veil with eyes full of gratitude. This gratitude wasn't entirely to thank him for saving his life, but also for insulting the solitary falcon, which had been rather enjoyable for Hai Chen Feng. In his almost dying moments, those insulting words were the only retribution he thought he'd ever get. But fortunately, it wasn't the end of his life just yet. An awe-inspiring aura was slowly flowing through his meridians, and his entire body, which had previously lost all its functioning, now suddenly seemed replenished with energy. Hai Chen Feng was well aware that such energy wasn't something even his own master was capable of summoning. This is miracle. Hai Chen Feng's eyes were unflinchingly watching Jun Moxie's face, and slowly that expression of gratitude in his eyes started transforming into worship and adoration. Who is this man? He is such a mysterious man, but given how advanced his skills are, he must be someone exceptionally strong. The solitary falcon instantly turned around the moment he heard Hai Chen Feng's moaning, and suddenly found himself staring at the scene in shock. His brother disciple had blown off his Dantian in a suicide attack, and his injury had already reached a point where no man or medicine in the Xian continent was capable of restoring him back to his health. However, at present the Hai Chen Feng in front of his eyes was breathing far steadier than before, and anyone could tell that even though the man's injuries were still serious, but still posed absolutely no threat to his life anymore. Moreover, given the rate his injuries were healing at, one could estimate that he'd heal in no time as long as these ideal conditions were able to persist. It was evident to the solitary falcon from the aura which was surging in the atmosphere that this man in the black mask was someone beyond anything the solitary falcon had ever seen or heard of. Even though he was one of the 8 great master of this world, he still couldn't help smacking his lips. Luckily I didn't attack him in a moment of impulse earlier, else I would have been lying on the ground next to Hai Chen Feng. I got really lucky this time. Solitary falcon, a man who had always been known to be bold and reckless, was dripping cold sweat at this time. This is just unbelievable. Would even Yunbei Chen be able to match up to this man's strength? Since this thought had already crossed his mind, the solitary falcon secretly started drawing a comparison between the two men, and almost exclaimed out loudly upon reach a conclusion on his analysis. He could clearly distinguish that Yunbei Chen's strength, at the time when he had last seen the man several years ago, was not even in the same layer at this man's. If Yunbei Chen's strength was a small stream, then this black-masked man's strength was an ocean. I reckon that even if Yunbei Chen has progressed a long way since I last saw him, he still probably hasn't reached anywhere near this man. Drops made of cold sweat had already started dripping down from the solitary falcon's forehead by now. The solitary falcon was staring in shock, while Hai Chen Feng was staring in admiration, but neither man was aware that Jun Moxie, the center of the interests, was slowly inching closer to a personal moment of crisis. Even though Jun Moxie had only intended to extract a small amount of aura from the Hongjun Pagoda in order to heal Hai Chen Feng's injuries, but soon enough a huge storm had started rushing through his own meridians, which soon after was followed a loud, ringing, like sound inside his head, and his mind had been sent into a state of complete chaos and confusion. Suddenly, it seemed to the young Master Jun that he was stuck inside a void, and would spend the rest of his days living in vain. And all alone. This sudden turn of events had given rise to a strange sense of loneliness inside his mind. Meanwhile, a huge surge of aura had started rushing through his meridians, and it seemed that his meridians were harboring a turbulent sea of aura, with each wave stronger, fiercer, and more menacing than the previous one. Jun Moxie was naturally left lamenting his luck. I've been sensing and anticipating this moment for a long time, and now that it is finally happening, it is happening at the most unfortunate timing when I'm on the verge of completing a big assignment. The situation inside his mind was becoming more and more urgent with every passing moment, while the Hongjun Pagoda had already gone berserk, and had started emitting numerous gleaming rays of light inside his brain. A powerful suction force was pulling Jun Moxie's conscious into it, and this pull was so fierce that Jun Moxie could clearly sense that it was time for him to withdraw away from this place. Hai Chen Feng was extremely surprised by this sudden surge in energy, and couldn't help vomiting out some blood, while the solitary falcon was simply left dumbstruck. Jun Moxie reluctantly restrained himself as he slowly stated, I have stabilized his condition. There is no immediate threat to his life anymore, but I'll need to put him through a number of conditioning procedures before he is completely healed. However, I have an urgent matter I need to tend to, and therefore I must leave immediately. This. The solitary falcon raised his eyebrows, simply unable to guess his next step. Falcon, you will immediately take him to the Jun residence in the Tianxiang city. There, you seek out my disciple, the third master of the Jun family, Jun Moxie. He will assist Hai Chen Feng in recovering from this injury. I've already imparted all the knowledge he needs in order to heal this man, and this task should be rather easy for him. This boy should be back to his health in a few months' time. The solitary falcon nodded. As for you, I've passed down several styles to Jun Moxie, which are quite similar to the one you're trying to make. If you want to complete your style, you must seek him out as well. Anyway, I'm not really interested in these little things anymore. However, I must warn you that his temperament isn't as polite as this old man's is, and in case you wish to learn a few moves from him, then you must be willing to endure a few insults. Jun Moxie quickly finished his instructions since it felt as if the moment of a breakthrough was almost upon him. Remember, do not disclose the relationship between this old man and the Jun family to anyone. He deliberately didn't warn them, and just stated these final words in a normal tone since he knew that they wouldn't dare to go against his will. Jun Moxie, the solitary falcon, opened his mouth and murmured, and then looked up again, but only to find that the mysterious man had already disappeared. Amazing speed, the solitary falcon simply couldn't help crying out in alarm this time. He mentioned the Jun family before he left. I guess I'll immediately go there. He picked up Hai Chen Feng's body with one hand, and stated in a grave tone, Boy, you will not say anything about today's matter to anyone. Is that understood? If anyone finds out about this, then I will personally peel off your skin. Even though Hai Chen Feng's body was still as weak as a dead man's, he still spoke up in denial, I won't say one word about the mysterious master to anyone. What do you mean? The solitary falcon suddenly stopped in his stead. Meanwhile his long hair got caught in the wind as a result. Are you saying that you'll tell people about our battle? I cannot be sure. Hai Chen Feng hummed twice, and it seemed that his heart harbored infinite contempt for this so-called master brother of his. First you beat up someone so much weaker than yourself, and then you actually have the courage to ask me to keep my mouth shut about it? What happened to this courage of yours in front of that mysterious master? You won't say a word about anything, the solitary falcon replied back barbarically, "If you tell people that you managed to injure me, then it will arouse a lot of doubts. And if you say that I saved you after you destroyed your Dan Tian, then people will raise questions once again. Basically, if anything surrounding this battle comes to light, then the senior who just saved you will be revealed to the world. And let me tell you this once and for all. Even your master and I put together cannot dare to provoke that man. Hum. You weigh the situation yourself and decide." When a man of the solitary falcon's caliber states, "Even your master and I put together cannot dare to provoke that man," then the extent of the shock and horror which Jun Moxie's skill must have instilled in his heart becomes rather obvious. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 207. The Hongjun Pagoda and the Good Fortune. Since the solitary falcon was quite complacent, he was sure that Hai Chen Feng would keep his mouth shut because he had ordered it. And now that he was no longer worried about losing face in front of the world, he started focusing his attention on the task of finding Jun Moxie. As long as he was able to find Jun Moxie, he could improve the 17 strokes of his style. This is working out really well. But what's peculiar about Jun Moxie's character? The young master Jun's shamelessness was publicly known, but since he didn't wish to ward away two potential disciples, the young master Jun deceived them into going towards that Jun residence, and had only subtly indicated that his so-called disciple was a bit ill-tempered. However, such public knowledge wasn't something a man of the solitary falcon's caliber would have bothered to learn about in the past. His heart was full of joy and longing at the moment. It could be estimated that even if this mysterious master tried to con the solitary falcon, he wouldn't pay much mind to it. As far as the solitary falcon was concerned, the agility of this mysterious master was unmatched in every respect. But in reality, the young master Jun hadn't actually left the vicinity, and had simply escaped underground. But since his backside was metaphorically on fire, even he didn't pay attention to the depth that his body had gone underground to. However, it could be estimated that he would have already reached deeper than an underground well's boring limits. The young master Jun would have obviously wanted to find a more stable place to make this breakthrough. But by the time he spoke that last sentence to the solitary falcon, he had already started sensing that he was trying to hold back the turbulence of an ocean, which was soon followed by another loud boom sound from the Hongjun Pagoda. And more aura had started to flood into his body moments after. His mind had been launched into a state of complete confusion under the strength of the impact of this aura on his meridians. Meanwhile, the Hongjun Pagoda had started to shake violently. "I really can't hold this back anymore." Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't even wait for the solitary falcon's response, and directly casted out the yin and yang escape law, and drilled his body into the ground like a mouse would have under just menacing conditions. He was completely unaware that this vanishing act of his would completely turn the eighth great master's world upside down. Although the yin and yang escape law was indeed a peerless and unique technique, but its effect was something completely different from the solitary falcon's perspective. The mysterious master's agility was amazing awe. The solitary falcon had always paid special attention to his agility and had always believed that there was no one superior to him in this regard. However, today he witnessed an act of agility which was far superior to anything he had even imagined. This had also convinced the solitary falcon of this mysterious master's prowess, which is why he had obediently decided to seek out Jun Moxie. As far as seeking out a younger man for the sake of learning was concerned, the solitary falcon didn't seem to mind in the least. He was awfully clear on one immortal and unwavering truth: a superior in terms knowledge shall always be respected. On the other hand, Jun Moxie was now completely ignoring the solitary falcon's presence above the ground, and was sitting cross-legged inside the ground beneath. and immediately started to realize that the situation was becoming more and more intense. And soon enough the young Master Jun was no longer able to resist the power of the pagoda anymore, and found his own conscience being pulled into the pagoda. The door to the Hongjun Pagoda opened silently. Standing inside the magnificence of the Hongjun Pagoda's first layer, a few words suddenly panned out inside his mind: defend the desires of the yin and yang. Clear understanding is clear understanding. After one understands, one can protect the desire of the heaven and earth. As he read these words, a burst of white light flashed up ahead, while a fragrant scent rushed through his nostrils. And what was initially an illusion of a ladder up ahead suddenly became reality. These steps seemed to be leading up to a door, a solid but simple portal, which seemed to be opening slowly at the moment. The second level of the Hongjun Pagoda had finally opened its doors to Jun Moxie. An inexplicable burst of excitement seized Jun Moxie's heart. The first layer of the Hongjun Pagoda had given him some extremely powerful secret laws such as the yin and yang escape law, which had allowed him to defy the natural order of things in order to protect himself and his interest. As per the norms of this world, the young Master Jun was only a basic gold xian layered expert in terms of strength. However, with the help of this law, he could roam around in the company of even spirit xian experts without any fear of physical harm. It was almost as if a 3-year-old child had been given the power to transcend the status of an adult, and allowed him the right of an equal dialogue. Just imagine the benefits I could get from the second layer of the pagoda. Ah! He composed himself, and then slowly stepped forward towards the door, and felt a rather familiar kind of an atmosphere as he reached the second layer's entrance. Suddenly, there was a burst of light from within the second layer of the pagoda, and an endless stream of graphics flew out of it, spinning around in circles, seemingly resembling a bird's nest in shape, and then slowly penetrated into the point between his two eyebrows, and then disappeared with a trace, leaving no signs of ever existing in the first place. At the same time, Jun Moxie's mind could clearly see a series of words and few humanoid images inside it. It seemed as if those images resembled the flow system of his meridians. Everything seemed to be going just the way it had happened while entering the first layer of the pagoda. One who walks the scope of the heaven and the earth must protect the desires of the heaven and earth. One who rashly beheads another nurtures a heart of ice. 9 loyal transformations stabilize the soul by the will of the heavens, and then abides by it. Jun Moxie started becoming a bit excited after carefully considering the words again. From what I can tell, it seems the first layer was only a beginning to unlocking the heavens' fortune. Abide by the will of the heavens. From now on, only this can be regarded as the correct path ahead. He was standing motionlessly at the door of the second layer at the moment. The young Master Jun was completely unaware that his corporeal body was undergoing some very drastic changes at the moment. In addition to the huge amount of aura which was rushing through his body's meridians again and again, a huge amount of aura had also penetrated through the pores in his brain and the sole of his feet. And this crazy stream of aura was stretching and expanding his body's meridians in such a drastic manner that the clothes on his body were simply unable to resist their force, and had slowly turned to ash, and had then faded away into inexistence. The sweat pores on the surface of the young Master Jun's body were acting like springs, and were continuously emitting a dark, purplish fluid. The aura inside his meridians was gushing about in such a turbulent manner that one could clearly hear the sounds they were making. Since Jun Moxie's conscience was completely absorbed in this sea of knowledge, his mind was neglecting all external activities, which is why he had no idea that his body was undergoing such a major transformation. This second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda said, 9 loyal transformations stabilize the soul, which was very similar to the directions of the first layer. The 9 refinements of the soul. and one never falls into hell. The first two directives of the Hongjun Pagoda have something in common, and that's the word 9, 9 refinements, and 9 transformations. The number of layer in this structure is also 9. But what does this reveal? It's unlikely that it's all just a coincidence, right? Jun Moxie's mind quickly evaluated everything that happened since the beginning of his time in this world. And after making a few calculations surrounding that information, the young Master Jun was able to realize that his body had undergone several changes before the second layer of the pagoda had revealed itself to him. Upon careful introspection, he was quickly able to realize that the count of these changes was actually 9 in number. The first time this had happened, he had lost control and his soul had unexpectedly landed itself in this world. And this was the 9th time, which had finally taken him to the second level of the Hongjun Pagoda. It's no wonder that my body didn't fall into hell after its death. 9 refinements of the soul. And one doesn't fall to hell, so that's the reason all this is happening. He couldn't help a wry smile. It seems that I'll have to go through these so-called 9 transformations before I can enter the third level. This obviously means that the tasks I'll have to undertake will be far more difficult than before. As the thought of this crossed his mind, his heart suddenly felt a strange sense of tranquil. And it seemed as if mind frame had changed by a lot. In this quiet and peaceful atmosphere, his conscience slowly started to float into the second level of the Hongjun Pagoda. This room was as huge as the one below, but wasn't empty. There was a 3-legged Dan furnace in the middle of the room. A multicolored flame was steadily and smoothly burning under the furnace. A book-like object was hanging near this furnace, wrapped in a golden and glittering skin. A few characters were inscribed on the furnace of good fortune. The moment Jun Moxie read these words, they unexpectedly and abruptly disappeared. Even the audacious hitman was very surprised by this. Jun Moxie couldn't help carefully inspecting this mysterious furnace from a distance, and then slowly took 2 steps closer to it. It started seeming as if a voice was calling out to him from this mysterious furnace, seemingly trying to pull him closer towards itself. That inexplicable force didn't seem irresistible at all. But Jun Moxie still didn't wish to resist it since it felt as if this voice belonged to a very intimate friend of his. Just as he approached the furnace, the flame under this furnace, which seemed to me calling out to him, suddenly jumped up and instantly wrapped Jun Moxie's consciousness inside it. Jun Moxie only had a very little time to feel it. But it felt as if his body was passing through the 18 layers of hell as a penalty. But since his consciousness was sober, he could clearly feel the extreme pain of it. And this pain had already gone beyond the point of his ability of endurance. Outside, Jun Moxie's body had already stopped discharging that strange fluid. His body had started feeling a burning sensation since it had already been wrapped in a large and colorful flame. Above the ground, that large maple forest, which was initially thriving, had withering in the blink of an eye. The entire range of plants on the ground had withering, irrespective of their ability to withstand heat, and even the most stubborn blades of grass were no exception to this. This initially plush forest had instantly turned into the driest patch of land. A cloud of mist started to rise upwards from the ground, and quickly disappeared into nothingness in the sky above. All the water within a few miles of radius had instantly evaporated. It seemed as if this lush part of the Tianxiang city had suddenly become an epitome of death. This land was so dry now, that even if one flooded this land with water, this water-depleted land would absorb the water so deep down in its water channels that one would probably never be able to dig deep enough to find any traces of moisture in it. Jun Moxie's fair and sturdy body continued to turn and twist in this flame, until this flame slowly and gradually reduced, revealing Jun Moxie's unscathed body. Suddenly, there was another calling-like sound. and Jun Moxie's body instantly disappeared from the ground. At the same time, and for the first time ever, he found his physical body standing inside the Hongjun Pagoda's second level. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 208. The Flame of Primal Chaos and the Furnace of Good Fortune. There were two bodies of Jun Moxie inside the Hongjun Pagoda at the moment. A real one, and an illusionary one. An irresistibly strong force was trying to pull the two bodies together, and soon the two bodies fused together and became one. The furnace of good fortune had started issuing a sonorous sound once again, and soon a light emerged from it, circled around the furnace, and then vanished into nothingness. Jun Moxie suddenly realized that his wrist had been cut, and blood was flowing out of that cut like fountain. However, instead of falling down to the ground, his blood was falling straight into the furnace. The initially fading multicolored flame started blazing up again, and had soon encompassed the entire furnace into its colorful conflagration. However, Jun Moxie didn't feel any heat from this massive fire, even though he was standing close proximity. The flame of primal chaos. These words suddenly appeared inside his mind, and then a dark golden blood-colored light flashed from within the furnace of good fortune, and instantly entered into Jun Moxie's body. The young Master Jun abruptly realized that the wound on his wrist had faded away all of a sudden, and if his body hadn't been feeling a slight discomfort due to the massive blood loss, he would have never realized that his wrist had just been cut moments ago. The multicolored flame suddenly stopped burning again, and the entire room quieted down once again, reversing the atmosphere of the room to the one similar to when he had entered the second floor in the beginning. The three-legged furnace remained silently in its place at the center of the room. The multicolored flame under the furnace was only burning with a very small fire underneath at the moment. But the flame was still so smooth that it seemed as if it would continue to burn for the rest of eternity. The book was still quietly placed next to this furnace. Jun Moxie continued to stare at his surroundings with eyes wide open for a long time, believing that he was inside a dream, and then suddenly pinched his thighs. Even though he felt the pain of the pinch, it still seemed to him as if he hadn't yet recovered from the shock of these sudden and unexpected turn of events. How did my body get in here? For a long time, he was unable to believe what his eyes were seeing, and pinched his body a few times as a result. He pinched his body so hard that at one point it seemed as if he'd pull out his skin, but this sharp pain finally made him realize, this is really hurting. It seems that my body has really entered into the Hongjun Pagoda. Does this mean that I can access it any time I want? Jun Moxie's head was still feeling a bit dizzy. It was almost as if the heavens were dropping meat pies on his head, and he didn't have any place to take shelter. However, the young Master Jun was still feeling a strange sense of happiness at this moment. He hadn't found happiness in shade, or in the radiance of springs, but only inside the Hongjun Pagoda. He. Blood becomes the evidence, soul's wisdom becomes the proof, and the soul transforms in strength. The flame of primal chaos refines all living things in this world. The furnace of good fortune turns into the supreme creator. These words suddenly appeared inside Jun Moxie's brain. The young Master Jun could clearly feel that his body, the odd ancient-looking furnace of good fortune, as well as the flame of primal chaos were now so closely related that it would be impossible to separate them. Jun Moxie took 2 steps forward and leaned over the golden-colored book. Just as his hand touched the book suddenly turned to a mass made of nothingness, circled over the furnace of good fortune once, and then vanished into the space between his eyebrows just as the previous images and letters had. Folk remedy. These two ancient-looking words would spin around in Jun Moxie's mind for a while, and would then be replaced by numerous dense characters and imagines depicting the alchemic methods to create numerous types of potions, and also the necessary steps to create the constituent raw materials. Once these methods had circled inside his head for a while, they would once again be replaced by those two words. I understand. Jun Moxie mumbled these two words as he read those characters inside his head. Now I really understand. The hitman's heart was jumping with excitement, but the composed hitman suppressed his heart's excitement and calmed himself down forcefully. Simultaneously, he realized something very amazing and gratifying. The flowing qi inside his meridians had mysteriously converted into the same colors as that of the Hongjun Pagoda's aura, and was now slowly swimming around his meridians in very mist-like manner. Such progress is simply amazing. The art of unlocking the heaven's fortune surely requires some very difficult things, but once I've practiced and mastered its methods, it definitely gives good rewards in return. Jun Moxie estimated that his present strength had reached the peak of the gold Xian layer as per the standards of this world. He had gone from the peak of silver Xian to the base of the gold Xian earlier, but had now stabilized into the gold Xian layer, and had then progressed to its mid-mark, and had then surpassed to its peak. And all this had happened in a matter of 6 seconds. It must be mentioned that Jun Moxie had only arrived in this world a mere 2 months ago. He had found himself in a very troublesome situation upon entering this world. Moreover, he had acquired the body of a young man whose strength was only comparable to that of a poor beggar. His family was in crisis. His life was in crisis. His body's strength was only comparable to that of an ant in this world. Had the original Jun Moxie persisted in this world any longer, then he would have succumbed to his end very easily in no time at all. In fact, had it not been for the Hongjun Pagoda's support, the new Jun Moxie would have also already died countless times by now. He had always relied on this secret to transform his perilous circumstances into safety. However, it was absolutely undeniable that his personal strength was far from being adequate. His body's strength had reached the peak of the Silver Xian realm in less than 2 months' time, which was no less than a miracle. However, Silver Xian's strength isn't enough to ensure one's safety in this world. It could be said that his life was still in danger at that point, and he could still be vanquished in case the circumstances changed against his best interests. Then a few days ago, he received the yin and yang escape law, and the young Master Jun was finally able to find a way to ensure his life's protection. Moreover, this law had given him the best means to protect himself when in danger. However, Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 209. You will wish you hadn't said that. The young Master Jun was a bit puzzled. As far he was concerned. Do I really look that scary? I mean, just look at this girl. She looks as if she'd start crying any minute now. The distance between the two parties wasn't much. And the young Master Jun's small steps forward had obviously been bringing them closer. Yen Meng. Don't panic. I will behead this shameless be *starred with my sword, the young man smiled as he stated confidently. And then slowly approached closer to Jun Moxie, having already unsheathed his sword. And then shouted, "You shameless be *starred. Step any forward and you court your death." Seeing his shiny sword made Jun Moxie even gloomier. And then his words only made him angrier. And how am I being shameless? Isn't this guy just clearly bullying me? You may like to bully other people. But you've clearly found the wrong person today. You can't protect yourself, And you're telling this woman that you'll kill a masked stranger for her? Your mother really gave birth to a b *starred. D*mn. I'll show you. You're going to regret this forever. The young Master Jun's initial feeling of excitement had long died down, and had instead been replaced by a sense of anger. And hence he took a couple of large strides forward, feeling it necessitated to teach this arrogant youngster a lesson. As he walked forward, he suddenly felt a cool breeze chilling his body, and was forced to look down in that moment of surprise. "You're the real scoundrel," the young Master Jun shouted back, as he covered little Moxie with one hand. He had finally realized that his entire body was an *ked. This was obviously far less shameful than running home an *ked without realizing it. His body had been set ablaze previously when he had undergone a refining procedure by the flame of primal chaos. And even though his body had received enormous benefits without even suffering any burns from the fire, his clothes had been turned to ash in moments. However, Jun Moxie's body was underground at that time, while his conscience was inside the Hongjun Pagoda, which is why he had no knowledge of it. He hadn't realized this at the time when he had pinched his body since he was too intoxicated by the unexpected turn of events, and had completely forgotten about all other things because of it. After coming out of the Hongjun Pagoda, the young Master Jun was in such an excited frame of mind upon realizing that his strength had progressed a long way that he simply didn't notice it, and soon enough found himself being cursed and abused by complete strangers. During this sudden transformation from feeling like a hero to being called a rogue, Jun Moxie simply hadn't realized that he was standing stark and *ked. You are such a shameless character that you've even turned to the thief who shouts the same at others. The young maiden continued to stomp her feet while clutching her eyes shut. "You're a scoundrel. And then you have the courage to call others rogue. You're an utterly shameless character." Although the young Master Jun was clutching little Moxie with one hand, his face showed absolutely no signs of embarrassment as he opened his mouth to bicker in a sarcastic repartee. "There is nothing rogue about a man running around an *ked in the streets. We were born an *ked. And we will die an *ked. Our parents were an *ked when they conceived us. Why don't people call that rogue?" However, the eyes peeping at such things from the crevices of their fingers and then shouting rogue are the real scoundrels that plague this world. "I didn't ask you to see me. Then why were you staring at me? You profane my innocence. You're the thief shouting thief here. And then you have the courage to call me a scoundrel? You're really unreasonable." Jun Moxie twisted his words to force logic in the most unreasonable ways, backing it with utter shamelessness. "You young woman are the real scoundrel here." The young Master Jun advocated his preposterous reasoning in the same tone as that young girl had, seemingly mimicking her. and having raised his standards to a completely new and unrivaled height of shamelessness. You, 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 Xiao Fengwu. Hurry and kill this lecherous man. He insults me, the girl shouted as she stomped her feet once again. He actually has the courage to lecture me. And dares to call me a scoundrel after. Your family name is Xiao? Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. I hate the family name Xiao. In my experience, nothing good has ever come from that family name. So it's no surprise that an arrogant youngster from such a hateful family name is acting like such a rogue. Recalling the pain and hardships that the Silver Blizzard City had forced on his uncle had obviously made Jun Moxie extremely sensitive towards that one family name. The young man named Xiao Fengwu suddenly became very furious and shouted, "Shameless be asterisk starred. You actually dare to open your mouth and be rude towards my family? I'll take your life." He raised his sword as a golden light flashed from his body. This young man had actually reached the Gold Xian realm. Given his age, his talent was at least at par with Li Yuran. Such strength might have caused some minor problems for the young Master Jun a month ago. But now that his strength had seen a major enhancement, he could basically just ignore the opposition's threat. Just as Xiao Fengwu raised his sword, the N***ked figure in front of him suddenly disappeared, which was followed by a whiz of cold wind. And soon he found his face being slapped by a cold hand, while his crotch simultaneously felt a very powerful foot. The man's upper body curled down to his legs like shrimp, while his sword fell to his side. Chi sounds were made as a piece of cloth was torn off from his robes. Although Xiao Fengwu wasn't weak, but he still lacked practical fighting experience. And the young Master Jun's kick had sent his liver and gallbladder mourning with pain as a result. The man rolled 3 feet and fell to the ground. But his face continued to look up at the N***ked man in front. He watched as that shameless and N***ked man wrapped the cloth he had just ripped from his own robes around his body. And then leisurely tied a knot. And then actually jumped around back and front twice while twisting his buttocks to inspect if some obscene parts of his body were still visible or not. And then turned his head forward again. His upper body was still bare, while his slender legs also remained exposed as the cloth only circled around his broad shoulder and then down to his waist, making his attire look very free and unfettered but still quite glamorous by the standards of this world. This person's appearance had completely changed in matter of moments. Even though his thin lips, his oblique eyebrows, and that faint smiling expression were enough to incite fear in any man's heart, one still couldn't help but be fascinated by his style. He had just been exposed to a moment of such extreme embarrassment. But even then the young Master Jun didn't blush in the least. This was evidence of the fact that his shamelessness had reached a point where it had already surpassed all of its kind before and since. The girl, who was standing at a distance from this scene, had completely forgotten to cover her eyes from the shock of these sudden turn of events, and was now watching Jun Moxie with her tiny red mouth opened as wide as it could be, never having imagined that her companion, a Gold Xian realm expert, a peerless talent of his generation, would ever be subdued by just half a move of this shameless man's. Although this man's face was covered with mud, which made it rather hard to access his appearance, but it was rather obvious that he was quite young in age, and was in fact even younger than his peer. How could he be so powerful? What is your name? And where do you come from? You come to the Tianxiang city and actually dare to provoke me. Ah, are you trying to dig your own grave? Jun Moxie stepped forward in short steps since his present clothing limited the movement of his long legs to some extent. You wanted to teach me a lesson and then kill me? Really? Well, understand this. You're only alive thanks to my good nature. Else I would have cut you up and would have dropped your pieces to your grandmother's doorstep. Jun Moxie cursed, and then turned around to leave since he had no intention of staying any longer. How dare you? Don't ever let me see you in the Silver Blizzard City. Else I won't let you live. Xiao Fengwu cried out, his eyes reeking of a cruel and malicious aura. Boy, you pray that I don't find you again. I will slaughter your entire family. If I don't make them run from their own house, and then slaughter them like dogs, then I'm not a Xiao. Jun Xie was already preparing to leave when his footsteps halted midair. His eyes suddenly turned as cold as steel, and he turned his face around to look at Xiao Fengwu. Silver Blizzard City? You come from the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family. His tone was already cold, overcast, and extremely gloomy. Yes, that's right. Xiao Fengwu struggled as he tried to stand up, and smiled ferociously. Are you afraid now? Well, it's too late. Unless you and your entire family kneel down to the ground and beg me for an apology, I will slaughter your entire family in front of your eyes. That's good. That's very good. Jun Xie slowly nodded, his face dull, but not angry. Since that's the reason behind your arrogance, then I'm no nephew to my uncle if I don't punish you. You will wish you hadn't said that. Kneel before me. Xiao Fengwu was under the impression that this man would inevitably turn soft, and he'd get a chance to save his face in return, and therefore, naturally couldn't help sensing his greatness. Kneel before you, my ass. Jun Xie abruptly stepped forward, and slapped the man across his face with a heavy hand, and sent the man falling a few steps backwards, spraying blood from his mouth. Jun Xie followed after him, and punched him twice in each of his eye sockets, giving birth to a giant panda. I'll show you. I'll show you. I'm going to paralyze you. You think that Silver Blizzard City is that great, ah? You threaten me. Punch. You think that you can bully me because of your family name. Kick. You want to destroy my entire family. Bang bang bang. I'll destroy you. I'll ***king destroy you. I'm not just going to beat you up. I'm going to destroy you. Bang 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 bang. You want me kneel down and apologize. Not even if your grandmother drops. Bang 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 bang. You be ****starred. Jun Xie grabbed his hair, and raised his trembling body upwards as he cursed. You be ****starred. And then threw him down to the ground once again, and repeated the same procedure several times, and then grabbed his hair once again, which were still somehow painfully attached to his scalp, and then looked his face once again, and then sent his body flying. The man fell down to ground a few meters away, unconscious, unknown whether dead or alive. Jun Xie still didn't stop, and flew after the man once again, and started pounding more strikes to his body, even as the man's body continued to flow blood. The young man was awakened from his unconscious state several times, but sunk back into it since his body was unable to tolerate the pain of it. A man was lying on the ground, and an almost ****ked man was standing on top of him and was beating him up in a frenzied manner. Ah! The young girl was unable to even blink her eyes at the moment, nor could she understand how her companion had been suddenly turned into a human sandbag in a matter of moments. Things were happening too fast, and it was a bit dizzying for her. This young maiden's head was simply unable to make head or tail of what was happening at the moment, nor could she decide on her own course of action. What is your name? Jun Xie fiercely looked at her as he gasped a few mouthfuls of air, and then ferociously pointed a finger in her direction as he shouted in a rough voice, "Damn it! Tell me or you die." The young woman was almost in tears as she tried to open her trembling mouth, while her face had already gone pale with fear. Me? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 210. Don't call him your senior again. Are you a ghost? Jun Moxie shouldered no signs of being protective towards the fairer gender, and stared viciously at her as he asked again, "What is your name?" My name is Hongjun Xie. I'm very powerful, don't you dare attack me." The young maiden seemed awfully terrified, which was rather evident since her jade shade face had turned deadly pale. Since birth, she had always been treated with respect wherever she had gone. She had never felt so bullied in her entire life. This man is a super hybrid of a scoundrel and a bully. Hence it was only natural that the young woman was awfully frightened at this time. She had obviously never imagined that sneaking out from the magnificent jewel hall for a little playtime would result in encountering such a fiend. The young maiden's heart was constantly beating like a drum, and as the thoughts of those numerous dangerous possibilities crossed her mind, she started trembling more and more fearfully. Hongjun Xie? Jun Moxie was dumbstruck. This guy is from the Silver Blizzard City Xiao family? Yes? And you're from Hongjun Yao's family? She is my elder sister, don't you dare attack me. My sister loves me dearly. And she's terribly powerful. Hongjun Xie threatened in a trembling voice. And it seemed rather obvious that she was just trying to prevent herself from being beaten up. Jun Moxie was left completely dumbstruck at this point. So this is the girl Mu Shuatong was ferrying around? She's the one he was calling the little princess of the Silver Blizzard City? That would make her my uncle's sister-in-law to be. That basically means that she'll be my elder someday. Kill me now. Is this your personal dog? Jun Moxie pointed at the miserable-looking Xiao Fengwu as he asked. No. Hongjun Xie nervously waved her hand. No. He is not my personal dog. Hongjun Xie hadn't yet finished her sentence when the young master Jun cut her off in between. You haven't educated him one bit. He's not just a dog, but a wild dog. The young maiden quickly waved her hand to differentiate. He is not a wild dog. He is a man. He is my senior. His surname is Xiao. And his. He is a man. I don't see so. He is dog. Jun Moxie once again interrupted the young maiden's words as he wiped his hands and face off Xiao Fengwu's blood. I said he's a dog. That means he is a dog. An uneducated wild dog. Do you understand? No. He really isn't a dog. The young maiden had always been pampered by her family, and had never met someone so tyrannical in her entire life. Therefore she obviously didn't know how to deal with such a situation. And then suddenly an idea popped into her head. See. He has no tail. Dogs have a tail. So that means that he is actually a person. Jun Moxie was left stupefied once again, hesitated for a moment, and then broke into laughter. And then deliberately stated, you don't know this yet. But his tail was cut off. How else would they be able to make him look manlike instead of a dog? He wanted to say, pleasing to the eye, but decided against it. And then suddenly discovered something strange about the man. I beat him up so badly. But he's still breathing, his chest is falling up and down rhythmically. And even his fingers are showing subconscious movements. And it almost seems that he'd wake up any moment. Jun Moxie's mind burst into making some calculations again. His cultivation is very limited, so there should be no reason why he was able to withstand such a heavy beating. What is going on here? There must be something weird behind all this. He tightened his waistcloth, and then strode forward and stationed himself in front of Xiao Fengwu's body, and started sizing up his body with frowning glances, and then suddenly bent down laughing loudly. and then tore open his chest clothing to reveal a soft, shiny and silvery armor that Xiao Fengwu was wearing on his chest. Jun Moxie grabbed the armor with his hands and exerted some force to tear it open. But the armor remained in its place. What an amazing thing! Ah! The young Master Jun unceremoniously stripped the man down, and then stripped down that soft armor off his body. He grabbed the sword which was lying on the ground, and then pricked that soft armor with the sword's tip. Even though the armor was extremely soft in its make, it was still easily able to withstand the tip of the sword. And although there was no force behind the stab, the armor didn't even have the slightest of scratches on it. It was rather obvious that the only reason Xiao Fengwu had been able to survive this onslaught was because he was wearing this armor on his body. Xiao Fengwu was lying unconscious on the ground, and had no idea that this was happening. However, Jun Moxie had already understood that even though he had been able to beat this man unconscious, he still wouldn't have been able to kill him as long as he was wearing this armor. Han Yanmeng wanted to come forward and rescue her companion, but was afraid of Jun Moxie's strength, and feared that he might actually slap her in the face, which might send her flying out as well, and hence had resigned herself to squatting on the floor, clutching her face, and crying silently. What is this? Jun Moxie asked Han Yanmeng. What is this evil little thing? I really want to know. Snow silkworm armor. Han Yanmeng opened her trembling eyelids and started staring at him again with a heart full of grievances. He's so shameless. His bodily skin is actually as delicate as mine, and he's quite good-looking too, but he still has no sense of shame or justice. He is so disgraceful. How can someone treat a girl like this? Snow silkworm armor. This a good thing. Well, good. Very good. Jun Moxie looked at the armor lovingly as he twisted it over and over, and then tossed it up and down. Han Yanmeng secretly thought of something and tried to hide it from reflecting on her face, but couldn't prevent her tears from stopping. Snow silkworm armor was obviously a very rare treasure in the mainland, but wasn't very uncommon in the Silver Blizzard City's high class. In fact, most people had one such armor. This was one of Silver Blizzard City's monopolized treasures. In fact, when it came to precious items, a snow silkworm armor was nothing special for them since they had several more advanced items in their arsenal. The young Master Jun was able to analyze this very quickly, and estimated that this young man might be carrying some other very valuable treasures. What other precious items is he carrying? Jun Moxie wasn't looking at her at this moment, but her facial expression had changed slightly by now. The young maiden was quite inexperienced in worldly affairs, and although she had only thought of something, but her subconscious actions attracted the young Master Jun's attention, and he could clearly sense that she was looking down upon him disdainfully at the moment. The best is the Xian silkworm armor, and I have one. I'm not wearing it. Han Yanmeng was suddenly startled to see that the bloody Jun Moxie was looking at her, and was so scared of his appearance that her naive heart almost stopped beating, and eventually decided to say that she wasn't wearing the armor. I reckon that this bully will actually try to grab my armor as well, and might actually beat me up and then strip me over a Xian silkworm armor. Xian silkworm? Well, he. Jun Moxie looked at her maliciously, and a burst of horror gripped Han Yanmeng, who immediately raised her arms in the air. Don't worry. I know you're wearing that Xian silkworm armor, but I will not rob a girl. I'm very cultured that way. Jun Moxie glanced at her as burst of unhappiness seized his mind. If I'm able to clean up the Xiao family, and then somehow Uncle and Miss Han Yao's love finds a way, and they end up getting married, then this little girl will become my elder in name. Would I call her aunt? Or sister-in-law? Ah, this so is disturbing already. And then there's a Xian silkworm armor right there in front of me. And I simply can't grab it, this isn't done. Jun Moxie stretched out his hand and pulled her cheeks, scaring Han Yen Meng in the process. And then he laughed evilly as he turned around and sped away. Miss Han. Hee hee. I heard you call him your senior. Don't call him your senior again. Ha ha. Han Yen Meng breathed a sigh of relief as she saw that overbearing monster leaving at last, and finally started calming down. She patted her tiny chest, and then sighed, but was soon left puckering her eyebrows because she suddenly remembered the last sentence that monster had said before leaving. Why? This is obvious, isn't it? He's from the Xiao family, so why shouldn't I call him as such? I really don't understand this. It seems from this man's words that he's some sort of a martial madman. Anyway, he's definitely not normal. Han Yen Meng's eyes were open wide and round for a while as she continued to mutter to herself in confusion. Eventually, she came to the final conclusion: the crazy don't think in the same terms as normal people. I've never seen such a madman before. The autumn winds gradually started rising up again, and since Xiao Fengwu's injuries were quite serious, he showed no signs of waking up to his senses, leaving the unexperienced Han Yen Meng standing alone at a complete loss. And as she stood there all alone for an increasing period of time, the fear of heart also increased. However, a very strange phenomenon was taking place at this time. As the cold autumn winds were rising up, the maple forest was slowly fading out, and the trees were slowly turning to ash. The forest simply seemed unable to withstand the cold of the winds.